So JPFGO was like, what are we going to do for our anniversary? Well, we can't do Rasputin. That's a little bit too obvious. Well, we did Koyanskaya of the Light. What if we did Koyanskaya of the Darkness? And that's what we got for New Year's. And I'm not sure how I really feel about this servant because she's kind of a mix between the original Koyanskaya of the Light, but then also kind of being her own DPS servant, because this servant hits really hard without any of her damage mods. You would really think she's not all that spectacular or anything, but if you have both of her damage mods up, she is one of the hardest hitting Buster AoE servants in the game, including other characters' damage mods. It's like the people she's being out damaged by are like a full power Mao Nobu, or someone like Raika with all of her damage mods active as well. So it makes her a very, very powerful servant, the fact that she can hit really hard and she has decent support type skills like the original Koyanskaya. But is she worth summoning for? Well, we're going to talk about that in today's video. But before we begin, if you have not already, click that like button and that subscribe button. It greatly helps me out a lot and shows your support for the channel. If you want another free way to show your support for the channel, I am affiliated by all means with LD Emulator and Loot Cakes down in the description down below. And no, using an emulator does not get your account banned on FGO. They're actually rather generous when it comes to people playing on emulators. Just be wary that LD Emulator is an Android emulator, and so if you're on an iOS device, make sure you have no sync cords before you transfer over, because you will lose them for transferring over to a different OS type. If you want more content because you're absolutely just starving and you don't think the daily uploads are enough, well, I stream every weekday on Twitch as I'm back from vacation. We actually had a really nice stream, I guess the day that this video went up, Friday, although this video is going up Saturday actually, so the day before this video, I suppose? I don't know, but we did the GSSR rolls for JP, we did some summoning for Koyanskaya of the Darkness. That is exclusively over on the Twitch, so if you want to take part in some things like that, make sure that you follow the Twitch, or click that join button to become a channel member where you get access to channel member exclusive content. Now with all that being said, let's go ahead and talk about Koyanskaya of the Dankness. Which really, when it comes to this servant, I'm not really sure how I really want to judge her hits, because she has fine hits, but is she a support? Is she a DPS? But even when it comes to being a DPS, she's really not a DPS in the more conventional manner, because she really only cares about getting damage off with her NP, and then everything else is kind of there to support the party. I guess the main takeaway would really just be that her hits are absolutely fine. I mean, the 2 arts cards with 3 hits on them are good enough to get the job done, especially if you can get crits on them. Her quick card is really good. It's just unfortunate that she only has 1 of them because her star gen is pretty good. She has the passive foreigner skill that gives her 2 stars every turn, and it has 4 hits on it. So it's a little unfortunate that they didn't go with like a 2 quick 2 arts deck and then maybe make her an art servant or a quick servant. I would have really liked to see that, but I guess they wanted it to be consistent with the original Koyanskaya, because again, they made her a Buster AoE servant again, so just a little odd, I don't know. But who cares about all those normal hits? She has a 5-hit extra attack, and you guys know that's the only thing we care about in these parts. If you aren't aware, it's a composite card that gens stars, NP, and does big boy damage. And 5 hits is really that sweet spot for a lot of the extra attacks, but no meme, her hits are absolutely fine, but it's really the skills that make the servant with this one and the NP. So starting off with skill 1, this is a tremendously powerful Buster skill, because what this does is it buffs the entire party's Buster performance by 30% for 3 turns, and charges the entire party's NP gauge by 30%. And then it has this bonus effect of lowering Hominidae servants' star absorption ability by 100% for 1 turn, which those are basically like every servant in the game. I mean, if you look up that tag for servants, it's like 269 of them come up or something like that. It is an absolutely absurd amount that come up. And I guess it's just all of the servants that are not beasts, because Melusine's not on there and Kiara's not on there, so they don't count as Hominidae servants, but Kama's on there despite Kama becoming a baby beast. So maybe they don't count Kama because she didn't technically become a beast. I really don't know what they're going for here, but I think that's the general theme, because, you know, I'm not seeing Kiara and Melusine, and they were counted as damage bonus servants during the event, which was like, oh, Hominidae servants don't do as much damage, but non-Hominidae ones do extra damage. But really, I'm harping too much on it because it's really not that big of a deal, because it's only for 1 turn. Even if you're kind of using her as a support DPS and you're like, oh man, I was using Shiro Muramasa, now he can't crit for this turn. I don't know why you're using Shiro Muramasa with her. But, you know, I guess if you were like, man, I really want those Buster cards on Muramasa to really just hit different. Then again, it really only matters for 1 turn. It's not that big of a deal. The real shining thing for this skill is that it kind of takes what Koyanskaya of the Light does and compresses it down to a party-wide skill, so you're not giving one ally 50%, but you're giving the entire party 30% for the battery and the buster buff, and I think that's insanely good, especially if you want to use her as a secondary DPS, or you have 3 people that are all pretty decent damaging servants, like say people like Himiko or Koyanskaya of the Light, who are both DPS and support type servant. Even someone like Morgan falls into this as well, or Morgan functions really well as like a secondary DPS. You can kind of just build this team now of like Koyanskaya of Light, Dark, Morgan, or Himiko, because they're all DPSs, they all love the buffs they all give to each other, but they're all really good at supporting the others as well. And so it just kind of gives us the last piece to making Buster a far more interesting meta. Then we have the second skill, which kind of confirms something that I've been saying for a long time. I've been saying that Buster is really focusing on the overcharge mechanic for a lot of their servants, because you have characters like Himiko and Morgan that function somewhat as Buster supports, and that you would put in a lot of Buster team comps that also give this kind of overcharge niche to the entire party. Well, Koyanskaya of the Darkness is kind of the culmination of that, because she targets one ally in particular and gives them 2 stages of NP for 1 turn. I don't know why it's for 1 attack, because it's not like you can fire NP twice per turn. Unless, you know, the next support is going to be like you can fire NP twice per turn, and then this is going to be absolutely broken. So maybe that's why they made it for 1 turn and not for like 1 attack or something. I don't know. But it kind of gives you the culmination for it, because then she can just give you additional NP stages, and it kind of allows you, if you're using those team comps with like Morgan, Himiko, or Koyanskaya of the Darkness, you can actually just straight up overcharge climb all the way to overcharge 5 if you absolutely wanted to do something like that. And it just gives Buster that advantage that Quicken Arts don't have yet. They don't have this ability to just easily climb up to overcharge 5 with their supports, because their supports just don't do it. Really, the only person of note that really does do it is Da Vinci Rider, but that's really not relevant for anybody else, and you're really kind of just using it for her when she's farming. You're not like bringing Da Vinci Rider or double Da Vinci Rider to support somebody so you can overcharge climb them to a higher level. You just rather bring double Castoria. So it's really fitting Buster into a very interesting niche here. But this isn't all that the skill does. It also gives them the inverse to Koyanskaya of the Light skill. So Koyanskaya of the Light gives people an on-attack buff that their Buster cards gen NP, while Koyanskaya of the Darkness gives them an on-attack buff. They drop stars when they use their Buster cards. So between both of them, they have turned the Buster card into an extra attack. Literally, we are in the extra attack meta with the double Koyanskaya setup, and it's a little ridiculous. Because this was the whole reason that Scotty was broken when she came out, because she literally turned quick cards into pseudo arts cards and gave them the damage of Buster cards. And so you were like, I'm just not going to run anything else because Scotty just makes the quick card the Omni card. Well, congratulations, the Koyanskaya units have done all of that and more. So now you can Buster loop with Koyanskaya of the Light, or just straight up turn all of your Buster cards into extra attacks, which is absolutely broken. And then it's just like a final little cherry on top. Any animal characteristic servants that you have on rotation get a 30% attack and defensive buff for 3 turns, which is absolutely broken, because the animal characteristic servants include people like the bunny servants, like Bunny Skahawk or Bunny Artoria. Even though those are really just costumes, they don't really have those characteristics. Just because they have them, they get this buff. It's absolutely broken. But it also means she not only can double buff herself, but she can double buff the other Koyanskaya that you're bringing. And it kind of, again, just feeds into the whole thing of, well, your double Koyanskayas are not only supports, but now they're also DPSs as well. Which I don't think I've heard anything more Buster, more monkey than, hey, not only are we supporting someone to make them do really good with Buster farming and Buster looping and just being a Buster servant, but even the supports do big busty damage as well. There has never been a more Buster thing said in all of existence. It's just like, it's so ridiculous. And I mean, the third skill, I mean, it's a bit more relaxed. It gives her Pierce Invincibility for 3 turns. It gives her 50% crit damage. So not only is she just making the entire Buster setup absolutely disgustingly broken, but then she herself has Pierce Invincibility, so she can't be stopped when she wants to do damage. Her crits are going to have a nasty bite to them, so you don't even have to worry about using Koyanskaya of the Light's buff on her. She takes care of her own crit damage. And then she just has the disgusting Omni debuff skill, because she poisons, curses, and burns, and then has Evil Curse, Toxic Status, and Spread of Fire, which basically makes all of those statuses more lethal. Now, I'm usually not the biggest fan of servants that do this, but because she does all of them, It's actually quite interesting because it means if any servants in the future are Buster and they have a poison, burn, or curse niche, she is going to fit right in with them, and it kind of just goes right in line with her being a support, because it's just like, hey man, if we get, I don't know, Lancelot Alter in like a couple months, and Lancelot Alter is like, I do 200% damage when there's burn, but if there's no burn, I do no damage, and it's something really specific and weird like that, well guess what, Koyanskaya of the Darkness has them completely covered. If Merlin Alter comes out, right, and he's a big, just chatty, slap people in the face with a big sword, but he's like, man, I would really like it if people had statuses, because I bump up the status effectiveness of like whatever the enemy has by 1,000,000%. Koyanskaya is like, hey, let's kill him with chip damage. It's just a really interesting niche thing that she does have, but it's going to be very good as the game goes on and you get more and more servants that do fit into these niches. So I think it's really interesting because the baseline for the skill, the invincibility and the crit damage, is already just going to be universally very good, but then they gave her something that kind of is going to help her out in the future as a support type servant. Real quick, she does have an interesting passive skill where she does get a 20% damage mod against wild beast type enemies, which includes a small handful of servants that you may or may not fight all that often. I mean, Ivan is one of them and he's a boss. I mean, Koyanskaya of the Darkness is one as well, and you know, she's a boss. Tomacat and Atalanta Alter are a little common. You see Jaguar Man every now and then. Lobo's a boss in 1.5, so like, you know, just mildly common enemies that you may fight. But then when it comes to actual enemies in the game, I mean, the werewolves are wild beasts, the weird Cthulhu, Lamu thingies, whatever from Lost Boat 4 are in there, Chimeras are in there and they're everywhere, Bicorns are in there, the Soul Eaters are in there, the Boars are in there, Hydras are in there. Very, very common enemies are in here. Vorpal chickens and wolves are in there, little monkeys are in there. Just a lot of like common enemies are wild beasts. And so it means this is not going to be like a little niche thing that she does have. You can actually make use of this, and this actually helps out her damage a lot, because if you look at all the things she's doing, she's giving herself a 30% attack buff, a 30% buster buff, and then a 20% special damage mod. And the important thing that you may not know if you're a newer player is that buffs are not additive in FGO, they are multiplicative, meaning those are not just like 30% plus 30% plus 20%. In the damage equation, those multiply into each other to give you much more damage, and that's actually why she can end up hitting really hard. So don't forget that she does have that in her passive skills, and don't forget that if she's fighting a wild beast enemy, she hits him with buff block for one instance for 3 turns as well, which again is a little insane because it literally just like negs what any of those people want to do. And if you're fighting a wild beast servant, I mean, you're just going to kind of make that battle an entire cakewalk. But moving on to her NP, she then raises her attack by 20% before she fires her NP. So truly, she actually has a 50% attack buff, which you guys will hear me say is very common now in FGO. What they do to get away with characters having a 50% buff is they split it up, right? They give like 30% on one skill or 20% in another skill like Ryoma does, or they do this where they usually put 20% of the buff on the NP and 30% on a skill. This means they don't have to make it a 50% mana burst that lasts for like 1 turn and put it on like a weird cooldown or something like that. It means they can kind of just make the other skills better and then simultaneously make the NP better as well. And so whenever you fire the NP, you get that full mana burst. Now, she's not getting it for a card type, she's just getting it for broad attack buffs, which again is pretty good, because unlike Quick and Art servants that really want to get those quick mana bursts and Art's mana bursts because it raises their NP gain values, Buster doesn't have an NP gain value that you need to raise, it really just wants damage. So instead of giving her just a 50% Buster buff, let's just give her a 50% attack buff when she fires her NP, so then all of her cards get the benefit of doing massive damage. So that effect on the NP already is really good. She removes all enemy offensive buffs, which is fine. It's not the most broken thing in the world. I would have preferred to see her remove defensive buffs because that's obviously stupid broken. But you know, it's whatever. She can remove offensive buffs. It does protect your party because it's like, hey, over there, they're kind of stacking those crit buffs. Let's kind of like remove those. Yeah, I don't want you critting my party for 100 million damage. Let me just remove that real quick. She then further supports the entire party by reducing all enemies' Buster resistance by 20% for 3 turns, which means on a subsequent NP, not only is she going to be hitting harder, but everyone else is going to be hitting harder. And then if she just already wasn't doing enough, she has a special damage mod against Earth attribute enemies starting at 150%, the same thing that Ereshkigal had, that brought Ereshkigal from just being a pretty solid like A tier servant to being like one of the better buster farmers to use in the meta right now. So is Koyanskaya of the Darkness worth summoning for? I mean, absolutely. If you don't have Koyanskaya of the Light, she's still worth picking up, but you definitely do want to try to get Koyanskaya of the Light to kind of complete the package. But if you have the normal Koyanskaya, this is like an absolute must summon. Pull out your mom's credit card and get this servant, because the amount of synergy that they have together, the amount of synergy they have with other buster servants is absolutely disgusting. And they did not need to do this, because this is literally like if they put out Merlin and then a few months later they put out female Merlin, like prototype Merlin, and she just did everything opposite of what Merlin did, so then you just had an absolutely perfect team setup. The only thing the Koyanskayas don't do is provide party-wide protection, where it's like invincibility, a dodge for everybody, but you don't need it because the enemy literally gets obliterated. Because keep in mind, both Koyanskayas are also DPSs as well, and really good DPSs as well. In fact, they're so good that you can swap them from being supports to being a DPS. They can be your primary DPS and then swap to being supports. That's why this team is so disgusting. You literally have two servants that are support DPSs and do a really good job at interchanging between the two, potentially three support DPSs if you bring Morgan or Himiko along for the ride, and it just makes Buster absolutely disgusting. So at the beginning of the year, you know, I was talking about like, oh, you know, Buster's kind of down bad. They don't really have the tools to compete with the arts and quick metas. You know, they just don't have what it takes. But I guess K-Lab said, hey man, you're a big dumb dummy, and we're just going to put out a bunch of servants this year, namely the double Koyanskayas, to prove you wrong. And you know what? I will hold that L. Koyanskayas definitely have brought Buster to the forefront. Maybe I'll do a discussion video talking about whether or not they've surpassed the arts meta or not, but let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. I am very excited to see this next year of FGO because this year was really powerful. I'm very excited to see where they go this year. With all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.